Line connecting these two nodes. It represents the rigid binary currently dictating our civilization's approach to the genome. But as the nodes shift and glitch, the tension becomes unsustainable. The line has to shatter. On one side sits essentialist humanism. This framework treats our genetic code as a sacred, unalterable baseline. It polices modification to maintain a specific definition of what it means to be human. On the other side is libertarian transhumanism. It embraces genetic change, but primarily as a consumer product, something to be bought and sold within existing market structures. This binary creates a specific risk. If our only choices are sacred stasis or market extraction, we move toward a genetic feudalism where biological agency is restricted by wealth. In 2026, meta-theorist Benoit Nounier-Lapierre introduced the double transversal transjective quadratic model, or delta t squared, as a way to step outside this debate. Delta t squared isn't a loose metaphor. It's an operative geometry designed to replace legacy philosophical frameworks with a logic of continuous reconfiguration. To reach what Nounier-Lapierre calls the post-DNA global phenotype, we have to map this architecture from the ground up and see how it dismantles the binary trap. We start with our current condition, biology, technology, and socioculture, existing as these parallel, isolated planes. Traditional interdisciplinary efforts attempt to bridge these gaps, but they leave the rigid structure of each discipline intact. The domains remain closed off from one another. The delta t-square model replaces these bridges with transversality. It is a diagonal cut that slices across all strata simultaneously. As the vector slices through, the planes lose their closure. They ripple and bleed their data into one another. This cut forces biological reality and technological infrastructure into co-resonance. One can no longer change without triggering a reaction in the other. This transversal movement ensures that no single discipline can retreat into isolation. It forces a continuous reconfiguration across the entire network. If we zoom into the micro level of this transversal cut, we see a shift in how agency itself is defined. The traditional view relies on a discrete, autonomous subject, the human, acting upon a passive object. Transjectivity dissolves that boundary. The subject and object are no longer separate. They co-emerge within this pulsing relational field. Agency is no longer located in the individual human. It arises from the tension of being thrown across this field. Consider a human interacting with a CRISPR-Cas9 protein. They are not an operator and a tool. They are a single evolutionary assemblage, where the outcome depends on the relationship between them. This means the human is not a fixed biological noun. In this model, the human functions as a mathematical variable of radical plasticity. By moving from subjectivity to transjectivity, we remove the static definitions that essentialist humanism needs to survive. We can now use these transjective fields as anchors to plot the actual 3D geometry of the delta t-squared model. Axis 1 is radical creolization. Its goal is to strip the genome of ancestral nostalgia and any attachment to biological purity. Under this axis, DNA is treated as liquid software, a substrate available for open-source recombination rather than a sacred text. This connects to Axis 2, xenofeminist bioaccelerationism. It operates on the anti-naturalist principle that if nature is unjust, we change nature. This requires an object-oriented ontology, where the human body is viewed as a hyperorganon, an object among objects, without theological privilege. When we treat the body as an object, we clear the ethical ground to view it as a malleable substrate rather than a finished work. Together, these axes weaponize alienation against biological determinism, making the body fully rewritable. Axis 3 introduces the reality of computational post-labor. Here, AI is a transjective actant that absorbs the cognitive and manual burdens previously required for survival. As production is displaced into automated feedback loops and data flows, labor ceases to be the central organizing principle of human activity. This shifts the very definition of economic value away from the hours a human spends working. This plots our final vertex, Axis 4, or neoculturation. With human survival uncoupled from labor, Culture becomes a space of rapid algorithmic recombination. These systems mix cultural elements at speeds that allow societies to bypass colonial lineages and historical constraints. Human work is redirected. Instead of laboring for survival, energy is focused on aesthetic, cultural, and morphological evolution. This completed tetrahedral structure is not a closed system. It differs from classical dialectics, which try to resolve all contradictions into a final, stable synthesis. It also avoids the static expansion of a perfectly smooth, flat network. Inside the tetrahedron is the quadratic torsion, a constantly shifting cloud of vectors that agitates the entire shape. This torsion represents a state of productive misalignment. It is a mathematical remainder that refuses to be neatly resolved or synthesized. This constant agitation prevents the system from settling. It ensures that the model stays in a state of dynamic disequilibrium, forcing continuous adaptation. This mechanism is what prevents the new biopolitics from calcifying into a static, oppressive hierarchy. To see how this geometry functions in the real world, we can look at a specific, localized application. The Kennemagorian family compound in Sierra Leone serves as an operational blueprint for this meta-theory. This diagram shows a flat metabolism. Energy, information, and resource management run in a continuous, non-extractive loop. In this environment, AI is a partner in horizontal logistics. It optimizes the flow of resources without the need for vertical, extractive management. By automating the metabolic needs of the compound, human effort is freed for architectural and theopoetic creativity. The compound functions as a localized test site, showing how these decentralized systems can support a post-colonial way of living. When we scale this logic back up to a global level, we see the intended output of the delta T-square architecture. It is the post-DNA global phenotype. This is a view of life as liquid software. The phenotype is a hyper-adaptive entity that co-constitutes its environment, continuously rewriting its own code. The tetrahedral framework ensures that this transition expands agency and joy, rather than repeating the hierarchies of the past. The definition of the human as a fixed, isolated object gives way to a relational way of being, where our identity is an ongoing negotiation within a transjective field.